YouTube, what's going on? Kevin, the Tech Ninja here, and today we're breaking down some of the best phones you can buy at any budget. This year we've seen some fierce competition, so without further ado, let's do it how we do, guys. $100, what can we get? And the first phone comes in a bit less than $100. It's $60 and you can buy it from GearBest. It's a recent smartphone that's getting some pretty decent praise for the price. It's the Doogee X95. It gives you a lot of bang for your buck, and it is the perfect first phone or a spare backup phone if you're looking to do the basics. It's a 6.52-inch HD plus 600 nit LCD display with a 19:9 aspect ratio and Corning Gorilla Glass protection. As far as the camera, we're looking at a triple camera setup with 13 megapixel main, 2 megapixel depth, and 2 megapixel telephoto with a front 5 megapixel selfie shooter. Also on the front, it has a teardrop style notch, not thick bezels, which is pretty cool to see at this price point. Now, this thing is definitely made of plastic. It is tons of plastic. There's no fingerprint scanner or no in-body display scanner, anything like that. But as far as the chipset, it's MediaTek MT5737, and it's a quad-core chip at 1.3 gigahertz. And you know, for this price, that's definitely passable. You can get by with it. And then you have 2 gigabytes of RAM and 32 gigabytes of space, and it's also expandable too. And the phone has this hybrid SIM slot. I will say one of the most impressive things about it has to be the battery life. You have a 4350 milliamp battery, it supports 10-watt wire charging, and that is really good for a phone with such low-end hardware. You have amazing battery life. And for 60 bucks, it's not a bad deal. So for the sub $200 price point, we really don't have a phone that stands out, so we're going to $300. So sitting just below the $300 mark and above the $250 mark is the TCL 10L. It's $250. This thing sports a 6.53-inch IPS LCD Full HD display, and it looks pretty good. So it's powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 665 octa-core chipset, and it's clocked at 2 gigahertz. It runs the phone software, which is a custom TCL UI on top of Android 10. You also get 6 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes of storage via micro SD card slot. Now, over the previous price segment, you get more power, but you also get things like a fingerprint scanner and a quad camera setup. It's really impressive to see at this price point a 48 megapixel primary sensor along with a 8 megapixel ultra wide sensor, 2 megapixel depth, and 2 megapixel macro lens. And this setup is complete with a 16 megapixel selfie camera, which is found at the top left of the device. At 4,000 milliamp battery, it gets you through the day and a lot more. I think the main focus on this phone has to be the camera, and given the price, I think it's a decent phone. I did a full review on this phone, and the link for this is down below as well. So the next device is very promising. You're bumping it up to sub $400, and this is $399. It's the iPhone SE 2020. Now, this thing has a wow factor because it's a cheap iPhone. Looks-wise, it's nothing impressive. Actually, it's pretty boring. But if you've used an iPhone 6 or iPhone 6s in the past, you'll feel right at home, especially with the little home button in the middle. Its main selling point of the device has to be the performance and power. It's on a 4.7-inch IPS LCD HD display. You get iOS 13 and the full power of Apple's hexa-core A13 Bionic CPU, clocked at 2.65 gigahertz, 3 gigabytes of RAM, and starting at 64 gigabytes of onboard storage. Performance on this phone is amazing. It runs just as fast or just as good as my $1,200 version of this phone. Performance of this phone is great. It runs just as good as the $1,100 version of the iPhone, and that is very impressive. And the camera is very, very solid. Although this phone only has a single 12 megapixel sensor with OIS on the rear and 7 megapixels for your selfie, it still does a very good job, albeit not as flexible as more expensive phones or even cheaper phones with more lenses. I did a full comparison against the Google Pixel 3a2, so if you want to check that out, make sure you hit the link down below. But this also has things like a stereo speaker, IP67 dust and water resistant, wireless charging, And it's just a lot of those things that pushes it up to the next level. You also get Touch ID for authentication, and while everyone's wearing masks and Face ID isn't working, Touch ID still works great. And you also get Apple's suite of applications like Siri and all those things like that. I will say the biggest drawback of the phone is that the phone just looks old. I mean, its design looks like an older phone with huge bezels, and not a fan of that. And also it has a smaller battery at 1821 milliamps, and the battery drains very quick. I mean, from around 6:30 a.m. to around 4 p.m. I'm looking for a charger, and that is unacceptable now. Although 18-watt fast charging is supported now, the charger is not provided out of the box. So it's just one of those things where you have so many great things and a couple of bad things that may knock it down a notch, but still, for that price, still the best phone available. So let's take a break here and talk about the sponsor for this video. If you're like me, you love tech, sometimes you end up with just too much of it, things you're not using anymore, so why not trade it in and make some money? It's very easy with Trade More. And the best thing about it to me is that you don't have to wait until it's sold. You get an offer instantly. Let me show you how it works. Go to trademore.com, select sell a device. Now pick on your phone. Let's do an iPhone 11. Fill out the rest of the information and bam, you have an offer. Now if you want to buy a phone, it's the same thing. Select what phone you want to buy and buy it. Each device goes through an inspection, so you have nothing to worry about. Hit my link down below to head over to trademore.com and start making some money or find your perfect device. And once again, a big thanks to Trade More for sponsoring this portion of the video. And now, back to the phones. Now this brings me to sub $500, and typically I only stick to brand new phones, but I have to keep Oneplus in the mix because they make phones every 6 months. So this phone is a little bit older, but it's still in that price point and it's a really good phone. This is the OnePlus 7T. Now the OnePlus 8 is too similar to the 7T. They're almost the same phone, and the 7T is $499, which makes the 7T an absolute steal. You get a 90 Hz Fluid AMOLED display with HDR10 Plus at 6.55 inches, combined with a good stereo speaker experience. Comes with Gorilla Glass 5 protection, and the screen is very immersive too, with very tiny bezels. But where OnePlus really comes to win is when you combine the software and hardware and you get this just great situation and just a fluid phone that just feels great. This phone does come with a under display fingerprint scanner, which it's okay, but you can use Face to Unlock too. It has a 3800 milliamp battery with 30-watt charging, and you have a triple camera setup made of 48 megapixel primary, 12 megapixel telephoto, and 2x optical zoom, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide lens that actually does hold its own compared to other ones too. There's a macro camera too, which looks really good, and there's also a 6 megapixel front facing camera too on the front of the phone for some pretty decent selfies. Camera's not perfect, but it's very flexible, and a lot of these pictures are good enough to post on social media anyways. You do have a Snapdragon 855 Plus in there, clocked at 2.96 gigahertz with 128 gigabytes of faster UFS 3.0 storage and 8 gigabytes of RAM. This thing is also nice that it's supported by OnePlus for future software updates, which is on Oxygen OS 10 and Android 10, and it's just a great combination and one of my favorite OSs on mobile, period. So yeah, of course, it doesn't have IP rating and no wireless charging. That's gonna be some of the drawbacks, but if you can live with that for $499, an extremely solid phone, and one up there that I do recommend to a lot of people if they're looking for a phone and they have $500, this is a phone that you should definitely look at. So now we're at the sub $700 phones, and for me, it has to be the iPhone 11. Now it offers an incredible boost over the 7T. For one, you get support for both wireless charging and IP certification. 6.1 inch display, it's liquid retina, whatever that is. It's actually just an IPS LCD with just over HD resolution, but the resolution isn't high, but the screen still looks really good. You do have Face ID, 12 megapixel camera on the notch, and to be fair, the bezel is sort of big compared to other phones, and you know, Apple's design isn't too great anymore, but still, it's solid. Of course, it does have Apple's processor in it. This is the A13 Bionic with 4 gigabytes of RAM. And of course, you have iOS 13 and its software optimization, so you're not gonna have any lag. It's gonna run great for several years, and all those things to expect when you buy an Apple phone. You also have a dual 12 megapixel setup on there, complete with 4K 60 frames per second recording and the ultra wide angle camera, as well as night mode. Now, of course, you can definitely look at specs and things like that, and Apple isn't really all about specs. It's really about their software optimization. So we can look at specs and compare it, but when you actually use the phone and use the camera, you just realize that it's just solid. Now, for someone that cares about battery, it has a 3,110 milliamp battery, and I think it's pretty solid. It's not great. It does have 18-watt charging speeds, although the charger in the box is only 5 watts. It's very annoying. But overall, the iPhone 11 is a great choice if that's definitely your budget and you want to go into the Apple ecosystem. iPhone 11 is just an awesome choice for many people. All right, now it's time for the home stretch. The gulag has officially closed. The ring is shrinking. We're gonna talk about the sub $900 mark. And for no surprise, if you follow my channel, then you know that I'm a big component of the OnePlus 8 Pro. Look, over the OnePlus 8 regular, it's just a great phone. It gives you similar performance than the OnePlus 8, although it does add IP68 water and dust resistance, 30-watt wireless charging, as well as 3-watt reverse charging. You can also find an improved quad camera setup on there with 48 megapixel primary, 48 megapixel ultra wide, 8 megapixel telephoto, and 5 megapixel color sensor. And the color sensor can actually see through thin plastics, which is pretty crazy. And one of my friends, Vib, actually made a video about that, and I'm gonna link that down below if you do wanna check that out. Anyways, there's just something about the OnePlus 8 Pro's 6.7-inch Quad HD Plus AMOLED display that just looks really good. To me, it's just the best looking display out there. It doesn't get super bright outside, but it's bright enough for me. Now, you do have things like stereo speakers, and those sound really good. Now, of course, I did a full review, so if you want to check that out, you can do that. I don't want to gush about things too much, but for this price, OnePlus 8 Pro is my choice, and yeah, solid phone. Finally, we're here at the $1,000 territory, $1,000 and up. What phone would you buy? What phone do I recommend? And at this price point, it's hard to compromise for certain things, and no one should be surprised as far as what I think. For me, it has to be the iPhone 11 Pro or the iPhone 11 Pro Max. You know, once again, Apple's bringing you the best software and hardware, and it's just unrivaled. The phone feels great in the hand, and the design, especially on the cameras, have grown on me. And also, I love how this phone does have an amazing battery. It's 3,969 milliamp battery, and it supports 18-watt fast charging and wireless charging. You can do everything on this phone. It's just fast, consistent, and reliable. Of course, it is an expensive phone. You're paying that Apple tax, and you're gonna get in that Apple ecosystem, but for me, it's just been the most solid experience I've had on a phone. It has a 6.5-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. It's crisp, it's detailed, it looks great. Yes, Android users can say that you're gonna be restricted with iOS 13 or how the phone has an outdated design, it's kind of bulky, but to be honest, I look for function on a phone as far as what I can rely on, as far as the app selection, all those things, and the iPhone does check all those boxes for me. It does have a triple camera setup, and it's not anything to brag about, but you do have 12 megapixels on all 3 cameras. Although the camera is really good, it's not as good as some other phones, I think the video is just phenomenal. The video is consistently great. I've actually shot some of my YouTube videos and used iPhone footage within it, and no one has ever even noticed, which is a big thing to say. I've done a review on this phone too, so of course, link down below if you're interested in learning more. But this wraps this up for this one. It's not surprising to see Samsung not in the mix this time around. I kind of felt the competition has caught up to Samsung, and Samsung's prices continue to rise. I think that OnePlus just really snuck in there with the 8 and the 8 Pro, and it definitely hit a home run with these two phones. I will have to hand it to Apple. At every price point, Apple does have an answer for you. If you have a budget, mid-level, and high-end, Apple has a phone for you, and they're really good phones too. You get access to all their apps, their ecosystem, and their great hardware. The competition has never been tighter. There's so many good phones. Huawei makes some pretty good phones, and Xiaomi makes some really good phones, and just a lot of phones that I didn't get a chance to try yet or just didn't make the list. As always, guys, leave your list down below for the top phones you can buy at any budget, and I'll be checking some of those out, and I'll be leaving hearts next to the ones that I really like. Anyways, guys, as always, Kevin the Tech Ninja. If you enjoyed the video, hit subscribe, hit like, and I'll talk to you folks later. Peace.